When I am shooting a video, often I will create kind of a basic outline of the points that I want to talk about. That way I can kind of tell you ahead of time where I'm going to be landing, hopefully, if I don't go off on too many tangents. But also because often I'm trying to provide you very specific information about things like mintages or years that something was made or the purity of a gold or silver item. And I want to make sure that I'm not giving you false information. It's really important. That kind of defeats the entire purpose of making instructional videos. I want to give you guys the most pertinent information that I possibly can. But I thought it would be kind of interesting if I did kind of a free-form, no-net kind of video. Let's see how deep I can get myself into trouble by not using any kind of an outline, no notes to refer to. I've had this video in my mind for a little bit, and I think this should be kind of interesting. Hopefully I don't flub it too bad. Forgive me if I do. But this video, we're going to be talking about some of the equipment that I use on two kind of suspect pieces of silver. So it'll be an interesting journey to see how these two pieces that look quite similar, at least from the outset, actually register on all of these pieces of equipment. I figured if you don't have an opportunity to use something like a Sigma on a regular basis or a ping test or calipers, let's take a look. Let's see how these pieces register. If you are new to the channel, my name is White Cross. You can call me White. You can call me Dub C. You guys know that I answer to pretty much anything. And if you are new to the channel, haven't yet subscribed, go ahead and click on that subscription button. We'd love to have you be part of this community. If you're one of my returning subscribers, I thank you guys, as always, for being with me. This should be kind of fun. At least I hope it will. Please be gentle with me. So if you've seen some of my older videos, I've talked about this piece before. This piece is supposed to be a silver round, and that brings me to an important point. I am not a financial advisor. I'm not trying to offer any kind of financial advice. I'm simply trying to share some of my experience having bought and sold precious metals and rare coins for the last 30 or 40 years. This is a piece that I picked up probably 10 years ago, and it is supposed to be a silver round. A silver round, just a quick definition, is typically a 1 troy ounce silver vehicle. That is an inexpensive way for individuals to own 1 troy ounce increment pieces of silver. It's really one of the easiest things to manufacture when it comes to silver and silver bullion. Bars actually take a little bit more to create. A silver round is something that a lot of different companies can produce. And what differentiates it from a silver coin? A silver coin is something that is made by a sovereign country and usually has a face value, whether it's $1, a pound, or a euro, or increments of those. But a silver round is made by a private company. Even individuals can make silver rounds, and they typically don't have a face value. They are not legal tender in any way. They just are an easy way to own and create 1 ounce silver increments. So that's what this is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a silver round. It's not, and we're going to go into that a little bit later. And then several weeks back, I was at a local shop. And you guys who watch the channel often know that I'm not typically picking up silver bullion very often unless it's pretty interesting. But this piece was sitting in the owner's display case, and I thought, that looks really similar to something that I have at home. And that was this piece. So I thought this is going to be a great opportunity to kind of show how I would evaluate these pieces to see whether or not something is authentic. And this should be kind of fun. I'm looking forward to this. So, I bought this piece. It was melt plus, a couple bucks out the door. And I'm going to kind of show how I will evaluate that piece using several pieces of equipment. I've gotten to the point where I'm a pretty good analyst when it comes to deciding whether or not something is authentic. And believe me, this piece, even though it may look on your camera that this is a pretty good piece, if you held this in your hand, you would probably, hopefully, know pretty quickly that this is a fake. This is not what it's supposed to be. And I think we can see here it says 1 troy ounce silver 0.999. It's not even close. But what better opportunity to kind of show how these different pieces register with the pieces of equipment that I have here. It'll be particularly interesting. I am 99.99% sure that this is a silver round, but I've never really evaluated it before. So I'm going to crack the sucker open, and we're going to go ahead and see how it fits versus this piece on all of these pieces of equipment. Where do we start? I'm going to show you how I open a 2x2. This is a 2x2 as opposed to a flip. A flip is a piece of clear plastic folded in half, a little plastic envelope. I use flips often, and this is an example of a plastic flip. It's called a flip because you kind of flip it open. This is a 2x2. 2x2, a traditional thing that coins have been put into since probably the 1950s, 1960s. I don't think they go back much further than that. A clear cellophane window that is inert. I've never seen one of these that have PVC in them, so this is a pretty safe thing to use. Now, a lot of people will open this up to try to get to the piece that's on the inside by peeling open the edges. Typically, these are held in place with 3 or 4 staples, and there are millions and millions of really fantastic coins that have been ruined by staple scratches. People have been popping these open and the coin just accidentally rubs against the surface of a staple, and you know, a staple is made of steel or some other relatively hard element versus soft silver, copper, or gold, and it's a really easy thing to scratch. So I'm going to show you how I open these. And I don't always use an X-Acto knife, but I thought this would be a little bit more fun, a greater chance for me to cut myself on video. So I look for the largest gap when you can see kind of daylight between the coin and the piece of paper there. That's what I'm after. And then I will very carefully put a knife blade in there and go around the outside. Now I'm pushing up against the paper just a little bit because I don't want to come into contact with the coin at all. And then once I've got a little bit of a gap open, this is maybe ½ an inch, I simply break it out. And that way, I don't ever come into contact with the staples. This is garbage. It goes away. I never want to see that again. But then I've got the piece in my hand and I can feel it for the first time really. It sure feels good. Let's, you know, it's very similar to the one that I showed earlier. Let's see how we do with this, right? So that's step number 1, opening it up from the 2x2. And now that it's out of the way, put my knife away. I certainly don't want this piece to come into contact with it. If this was a good coin, and you know, if this was an uncirculated Morgan silver dollar, I would be a little bit more careful than I am. This is really just an illustration piece. It's just a 1-ounce silver round, right? That's what these are made for. So next step. Now I've got calipers and I've got a ruler here. You know, a silver round can be any shape and size that the manufacturer wants it to be. So this is really not quite as valid as if I was comparing, say, a silver dollar to a piece that was supposed to be a silver dollar, because we know exactly what the dimensions of a silver dollar are supposed to be. That's why I suggest you have a red book on your coffee table or your bookshelf or in your office at all times. They are an invaluable resource. Always refer to your red book whenever you can. I buy a new red book every year. I think that you probably should too if you're a little bit more of an advanced collector. But the dimensions, the nice thing about the red book is that the dimensions stay the same throughout the years. So you can have a red book that's 10, 20, 30 years old, and it's still got the correct dimensions that you need. You know, it's got the weights, it's got the purity, it's got the diameter, and that's what we're after. But I'll show you kind of what I would do. This is a pair of digital calipers, and I'm going to turn it on, and then I'm going to zero it out. You can see that we're going to put it down to 0. So we have put it down to 0.00 millimeters. We're going to slide it open, and we're going to put in the piece that I suspect, right? I'm going to move this back, and we're going to hold it in place. 38.9 millimeters. You can see that pretty easily, right? And put it back down. We want to be very careful with this too, because this also is metal, and we don't want to scratch this piece. So we're going to put this in, give it a nice tight squeeze. Let me see if I can do it. 39 even, 39.01. So there is a little bit of a discrepancy, right? These are not the same. They are definitely not the same. That's how I would use a pair of digital calipers. Again, it comes in handy if you've got published diameters. You can compare very easily. If something is not as precise as it should be, if Redbook says it's supposed to be 38.2 millimeters and it's 37 millimeters, something is wrong. You know, really early pieces, and I showed one of these Spanish Colonial 8 reales a little bit earlier. These can be off, especially if you're talking about something that's been worn a little bit, something that's got saltwater damage, or for whatever reason has been circulated. But even those pieces don't tend to be off by very much. You know, fractions of a millimeter or you know, a couple of millimeters on the absolute outside. And this is not a definitive test. All of these pieces just combine to give you a more accurate representation of what it is that you're looking at. So I wouldn't necessarily trust any of them. Sigma is a great piece of equipment. You guys know that I like the Sigma. You know that I've used the Sigma for many years. I think that my Sigma goes back 7 years now. But I'm going to show you how to look at these pieces without using a Sigma first and see if we can identify something before we even get involved with the Sigma, and I think that we're going to be able to. So that was digital calipers. If you don't want to buy digital calipers, you can actually use one of these. This is a ruler that has millimeter gradients there. You can see them at the top. And I'm not the best when it comes to measuring pieces, but you can get a pretty accurate measure using a nice ruler here too. You can see that I'm looking at the millimeters. Comparing the two, the nice thing about a ruler is that it doesn't need batteries. It's never going to go off, unexpectedly. I use digital calipers that actually do use a battery, and I use that probably more than I do my ruler, but I do have a ruler there when I need to. So the next step, actually technically the first step that I should have done all along, was to show you how I would have looked at these pieces with my loupe. I talk about a loupe often. This is a jeweler's loupe. This is a Harris loupe. And they are an inexpensive piece of equipment. You can find a Harris loupe on several different websites. I use Wizard Supply often, and I'll put a link to them down below. Throw them a little bit of extra business. But you can also pick these up on Amazon. I'm a big proponent of a 10x loupe, that is 10 times magnification. I don't often go deeper than that. I've got a 20 times loupe. It really hurts your eyes. I mean, it really does. This is something that makes my head start hurting after using it for a little bit. And I believe most of the graders that work for the big third-party graders, NGC, PCGS, rely primarily on a 10x loupe. This is something that most of your local shops will use. If you've got anything that is significant that can't be seen with a 10x loupe, chances are it really doesn't matter that much. You can be a purist, you can want the finest example possible, but really when it comes to modern grading, we're using a 10 times loupe. So with a 10 times loupe, and again, with one of the problems of rounds is that they are all sorts of different designs and shapes and styles, so it's really difficult to get a baseline for what is an accurate representation of what a round is supposed to be, right? You look at an American Silver Eagle and you've seen 10, 20, 50, 2, 3, 400 of them. You get to know pretty easily. That's that repetition that I've talked about before when it comes to things like English sovereigns. There's a reason why they look the way they do and that they remained essentially unchanged for more than 100 years. And that's because we want to be able to look at these and immediately tell if something looks off. It's a little bit more difficult with a round simply because they come in so many different styles and shapes. Even these two pieces that are quite similar have distinct differences, and we'll take a look at some of those in just a minute. But I would look with a loupe, right? You're going to look very carefully. If you've never used a loupe before, get yourself a loupe. It's an invaluable piece of equipment. You simply put it close to your eye, and then you use it holding it away from your eyes. Doesn't matter if you've got corrective lenses on or glasses on, you can get it to the point where you can see really, really good detail, and that's what you're after. You want to look all over it and see if there's anything that just looks wrong. You can see these copper spots here on the front. If I really wanted to, I might try to get rid of these. I like toning, I like copper, and I am not a fan of cleaning pieces, so I'll leave them on this piece definitely. Did the details look nice and crisp, right? Look at all the denticles. Those are those little bumps that go around the outside. You're looking at the details of the flag. Everything looks nice and crisp. Somebody's not going to make a pure silver vehicle that looks cruddy. They're probably not going to. So that would be the first thing that I would look for on a round. With silver coins, especially coins that I'm more familiar with, I kind of know what I'm looking at, right? I'm looking at hair, I'm looking at cheeks, I'm looking at denticles, I'm looking at dates, I'm looking at eagle feathers, those kinds of things. It helps you when you're grading a piece, but it also helps in determining authenticity. Is there anything off on this piece? This is that questionable piece. I mean, it looks pretty good, right? There's some pretty decent detail. Try to get her in focus like we did before. But it looks just a little bit more mushy. You know, a silver round is not ever something that should have been spent. They don't have a face value. You probably wouldn't have been spending these, even in exchange. If you had bartered something for them, you probably would have kept them in a 2x2 or a flip. So the fact that this piece looks almost a little bit flat, a little bit mushy, looks like it's been worn a little bit. There's no reason that a silver round should look worn, so that's maybe a little bit of a tip-off. Again, round's a little bit more difficult than a typical coin. It's one of the reasons why I'm a little bit more of a fan of coins when it comes to owning silver. I like rounds, but they have to be kind of neat rounds. So that would really be the first thing that I would do. Then I would use the calipers to check on the diameter of the piece, if it's appropriate. Again, with a round, it's not so significant. Then the next step would be probably, if you've got a set with you, kind of rare earth magnets. These are really nice high-powered magnets. Is this piece magnetic? I'm not going to bang on the round quite so much, but is it magnetic? Absolutely not. There is no stick to this at all. So it's not definitive by any means, but now we have used 2 or 3 or even 4 techniques to evaluate this, right? When I first pick it up, that's what I'm doing, is that heft that I've talked about in the videos and why I don't like gold bars, especially those in assay cards. One of the reasons why I wanted to free the silver round as quickly as I did from the 2x2 heft. Heft is just something that you can feel with your hand, and once you've held enough rounds, you kind of know that it just doesn't feel quite right. So I'm doing that already, and I probably evaluated with my naked eye before I even decided to buy this piece. I can definitely feel that this piece has that heft. It feels like a silver round. It looks like a silver round. But then I used the digital calipers. We looked at the diameter. I've used my loop to give it a more close, accurate representation, and now we've actually used magnets. None of those are definitive, but if any of those had failed an obvious test, right? If you were looking at a coin and the diameter was way off, it's a fake. There's almost no way that it's real. If you're using heft and you can compare 2 of them and you think, they're close, but one isn't quite right, that's a pretty good indication. That should raise some red flags. If you're looking at your loop and you're seeing those cast air bubbles in the fields of a coin that is supposed to be a coin, if you're seeing tone that just looks entirely wrong for the series, if you're seeing mushiness to details that shouldn't be mushy, you have to determine the difference between wear and a weak strike, and it's something that has just been made from a die. Die is those hardened pieces of metal that come together to strike a coin. If you've got something that just doesn't look quite right, that's why you're looking with your loop. So now I've already applied several different techniques. If any of them had failed, it probably would be a suspect coin. But just because nothing has failed at this point doesn't mean that this piece is real. Certainly this piece is not real, and again, we're going to keep on going with it. How about a ping test? I'm not a fan of pings simply because I've never used them enough to really get the idea of what a piece is supposed to sound like. My fear is a false positive. So if you're doing this, right, that sounds pretty good to me. If that's the point of a ping, you've got that classic ringing out sound, and this is a standard ping. It isolates the coin so you're not touching it, and then you're striking it with a wooden dowel. This wooden dowel is not going to do any damage to the coin as long as you're hitting the edge. You don't want to scratch the surface of the coin, but that's what a ping is supposed to sound like. Now, it will sound different from a good coin. There is a difference in sound, at least I think there probably will be. Let's see if I can get this piece in here. Again, since this piece was in a 2x2, I've never pinged this one before, but let's give it a try. I don't know, does that sound good to you? It's giving a little bit of a ring, but it certainly isn't going on and on and on like the other piece did. For that reason, I am not a fan of pings just because I can't really tell the difference. One of them makes a nice high-pitched tone. The other one can make a nice high-pitched tone, but it certainly doesn't sound, completely different from each other. Other than the fact that this piece didn't have that continuation, that ongoing ring. So if I was in a crowded environment, again, if I was at a place like a coin show or a gun show or a swap meet, the chances that you're going to be in a quiet enough environment to really hear that ping, to me, it just doesn't sound like it's going to happen. And again, when I showed this piece that is a fake, and we will definitely identify it a little bit later, you'll know with 100% certainty, that sounded pretty good to me, right? And if it sounded good to you too, is that going to actually give you the confidence that this is an authentic piece when it's supposed to be ruling out the fact that this is a fake? So it's not something that I do very often. And I'm willing to admit that could be user error because I simply don't have enough experience using a ping for all the reasons that I've talked about. But now we've used eyes, our own eyes. We've used heft, right? We've used a loop for a closer look. We've used digital calipers, we've used magnets, and we've used pings. So far, this piece hasn't been ruled out by any of those things to a point where I would be 100% convinced that it was fake. Now, heft for me is maybe a little bit more sensitive because I've been around these things for so long, but it's still kind of suspect, but we haven't ruled it out definitively, right? Those magnets certainly didn't stick to it. The ping sounded pretty good to me. The diameter, we don't know what the diameter is supposed to be. So the next thing I would do, and I've kind of gone in order of expense, what's the most expensive, the least expensive piece of equipment that we can go with first is our own eyesight, our own senses. They don't cost us anything. But we're going to work up to the Sigma. One of the reasons why I don't necessarily recommend a Sigma, especially for people that are starting out, or if you don't have a really advanced stack, if you're not buying or selling on a regular basis, this is a pretty expensive piece of equipment. It's a sexy piece of equipment. Everybody loves the Sigma. I'm a big fan of the Sigma, but it's going to take a big bite out of your precious metals buying budget. And what I'm trying to tell you here is that there are other ways to evaluate pieces first. So far, we don't have anything definitive, but we haven't yet looked at weight, right? We know if you are looking at troy ounces, that is 31 grams and change, right? And I'm willing to admit that sometimes these rounds can be a little bit off one way or another. I recommend one of these digital scales, a digital scale like this one that goes in grams, it goes in ounces, it goes in troy ounces, it goes in penny weights. That's DWT. I'm not a big fan of penny weights. My dealers know that I'm not a big fan of penny weights, but I know that it's a common thing that a lot of people use. And then we've got carats, not something that I would use very often. This is CT carat, as in the weight of a precious gemstone, not in the purity of gold. And then we've got grains also. Not something that I use often, but once in a while. So usually what I'm using here are the settings for grams and troy ounces. Now, one of these pieces of equipment is $20 on Amazon, right? You can find a pretty nice, high quality digital scale that'll weigh up to several hundred grams. So it's not going to weigh a kilo, probably. Certainly won't weigh a 50 ounce or 100 ounce bar. But if you've got a 10 ounce bar, if you've got 1 ounce rounds, one of these is perfect. It really is. You can find a little bit more advanced kitchen scales. That's what they're called. And those kitchen scales run probably $30 or $40. Digital scales also, they go to a much higher weight. So if you are buying things that are a kilo and above, I definitely recommend one of those. Always keep in mind you want to get a scale that's got the troy ounce and the grams at least. If you use grains, if you use penny weights, definitely something you should pick up. I stick to grams and troy ounces. So we're going to set this at troy ounce first just to see what it looks like. So this piece that I think is authentic, right, should weigh right about a troy ounce. Let's see where we are. Keep in mind that, again, we're on the Navajo rug, and a scale like this should be on a firm surface. This will be pretty close. This is great for illustration purposes. 1.01 of a troy ounce. It's not precise, right? If we really want that precise measure, we're going to look at grams. I don't think you really need grains. Grains are an even smaller unit of measure than a gram. But 1.01, that's right about where it should be, right? That's within that margin of error that I would still be comfortable with. So for this one, it's definitely where it's supposed to be. Now, here's our one that's suspect. Again, it looks awfully similar, right? It says that it's a troy ounce. It actually says 1 troy ounce silver, right? So this should also weigh 1 troy ounce. Let's see where it goes. 0.59. That's barely half of what it's supposed to be. So this would tell you definitively, it proclaims that it is a troy ounce. It is nowhere near a troy ounce. It's not even close. So without using $1,000 piece of equipment like the Sigma, I have used all of these pieces of equipment that if you totaled them up are still only probably going to be $60, $70. I'll throw in a red book for $19 also. All of this information will tell you without you having to do a scratch test. And I've got a scratch test also. I'm certainly not going to do it on a nice silver round. I'm not that desperate. But you can use lots of other pieces of equipment. We've used magnets, we've used pings, we've used our eyes, we've used heft, we've used the digital calipers. But the most important one here, clearly, is the digital scale. It proclaims that it is a troy ounce. It is nowhere near a troy ounce. End of story. This is a fake. It is absolutely a fake. It's not a great fake, and that's one of the reasons why we can tell that this is a fake, right? Because it's so clearly not what it's supposed to be. What would you do if this piece still was bothering you, right? We've used all of this other pieces of equipment on this, and it hasn't shown us definitively that it's a fake. So I am inclined to think at this point that this piece is probably real, but we don't know for absolute certainty. So we have ruled out an obvious fake, but this piece maybe still not quite right. My own perception at this point would be that I'm fine with this piece. I wouldn't need to go any further with it. I'm 100% confident that this is a 1 troy ounce silver round. Is it 999 silver? That's another great question, right? So this is the one last piece of information that we need. If these are not big concerns of yours, and I think they probably shouldn't. First off, you're buying from somebody that you trust, hopefully. And it's very possible that your dealer's got a Sigma. Let them use their Sigma, right? Let them weed out the fakes. That's kind of their job. They have no problem buying a Sigma. It's an expensive piece of equipment, but they probably need it a lot more than you do. So we're going to let them buy the Sigma. But if I still haven't convinced you that just this $100 worth of equipment that you can buy on Amazon, and again, I have to stress this too, it's important to learn these pieces of equipment. It is difficult to learn how to use a loop when you first try. I've been using one for probably the better part of 50 years. I'm pretty comfortable with it. But I've seen friends and family try to use it, and you have to kind of stifle laughs sometimes because they're just so not getting it. Practice with it, practice at home before you go out in public and try to use a loop. Get comfortable with it. This is an easy thing for you to do. Grab your favorite coin, spend a few minutes looking at it in detail. It's actually a very relaxing thing to do. It can teach you things that you didn't know. But once you get confident with using these pieces of equipment, they're really easy to use. There is a big learning curve on the Sigma. I'm familiar with it. I've been using it, like I said, for several years, so I kind of know what I'm doing with it. But there is a bell curve on it. There is a learning curve on it. It is an expensive piece of equipment. And as I've shown, the other pieces of equipment do a pretty good job of telling you what you've got. So what I've done here is I've told the Sigma that I think I have something that is made out of 99.9% pure silver. And this is a point that I've talked about several times in the past also. The Sigma is not an XRF. The Sigma won't just tell you what you have. You can't point a gun at this item and give it a nice readout that tells you, categorically all the different elements or metals that are included with it. That's not the way a Sigma works. An XRF is a very expensive piece of equipment. It can be dangerous to use. They run somewhere in the area of $8,000 to $15,000. A Sigma will just give you another pair of eyes. That's really all a Sigma will do. A Sigma, you have to tell the Sigma what you think you have, and then it will either agree or disagree with you. And that is a really important distinction to make when you're using a Sigma. In this case, I was able to use these other pieces of equipment to tell the Sigma what I thought I had. But if I didn't have those pieces of equipment, and if I wasn't familiar using them, I wouldn't be able to tell the Sigma with a degree of confidence what I think I have. And then it wouldn't be able to agree or disagree with me. So you really need to master these other pieces of equipment first before you even think about a Sigma. A Sigma will shut off after a few seconds, and it's prompting me to keep talking faster and faster. So let's go ahead and try it. We'll try with the silver one first. This is the one that I think is actually real silver, and it says, just like the other one, 1 troy ounce silver, 0.999. Here we go. So I've told the Sigma that I think this is a 999 silver, a millesimal 999, 99.9% pure piece. Let's go ahead and put this piece on. I have not done this yet, so this will be interesting. So what the Sigma is told us is, you see those two brackets there, one on the left and one on the right. There is a black cursor in the middle, and that cursor will tell you with a degree of certainty if something is what you have asked the Sigma if it is. It's almost kind of like a magic 8-ball, right? You've got to ask the question and then it will tell you the answer. In this case, that cursor should be as close to the middle as it possibly can. Now, for something like this, I'm fine with it being one step off of the middle, the absolute middle with the cursor. If you remember from the Lydian Horde videos, I checked every single bar and then I gave it a negative or a positive score based on where it fell on the Sigma. So if it's dead center, it's dead center. In this case, it is 1 degree to the right of dead center. So I would call that a +1 if I were recording this in my database of what it looks like on the Sigma. It's just an interesting way to see how it read, Try it with a fresh pair of batteries after you've recharged this machine. It does use rechargeable batteries. If you've recalibrated it, you can kind of check and see where it is. It's been a while since I've recalibrated my Sigma, I have to admit. But in any case, I would call this a +1. Still easily within those brackets, just one off center. So I would be comfortable with this. In fact, you can usually move something around a little bit and it may read slightly different from the first time you put it down. Even turning it over and putting it down a second time. See, with the face down, we are dead center. So right now I am really, really confident that this is a good piece of silver. But was it worth the $1,000 to buy the Sigma to come to that conclusion? Especially if I hadn't been able to master the other pieces of equipment that I had first. I wouldn't be telling the Sigma what I thought I had with a degree of confidence that would really let me know that the Sigma agrees with what I'm saying. Fine distinction, but a very important one. So now we'll go ahead with a fake. Now we've already determined this is nowhere near what it's supposed to be. So this will be interesting, and I'll show you what it looks like when we put something that is not authentic on the Sigma. Again, we've told the Sigma 99.9% pure is what we think this is. You can see a small arrow over here, hopefully. So the cursor is nowhere within the brackets. It's just gone. This is an indication that this is definitely not authentic. But to me, this is no more definitive than that 0.59 of a troy ounce on the scale, right? That immediately ruled this out. This is not what it is supposed to be. We don't know if it's actual silver, if it's just underweight or under purity. And for that reason, the Sigma can be at least a little bit of a help. But we already knew that this piece wasn't fake using a $20 piece of equipment instead of using a $1,000 Sigma, right? That's why I'm a big fan of using those other pieces of equipment before you really sink the money into a Sigma. One last thing I wanted to do. We can set this for a little bit higher purity. One of the nice things about the Sigma is that it has different settings for different purities. It's also one of the limitations of it. So you can put something on here that is pure gold, right? 22 karat gold. You can put in 90% pure gold, like our pre-1933 circulating gold coins in the United States. But you can't put in 18 karat. You can't put in 14 karat, right? You can't try 10 karat. It doesn't have those settings. It's really not designed for that. This is another limitation that kind of differentiates it from the XRF. XRF, you can test anything down to super low carat or even no carat, and it will tell you what it has. The Sigma doesn't have those settings. So it's another limitation. It's not ideal for things like jewelry, unless you're dealing with the most common forms of jewelry, especially sterling silver. Let's go ahead and set this to, we're going to go down to 99.99% pure. This will be the kiss of death. We'll see just how good the round is, the one that we now believe to be authentic. We'll go ahead and try that and see where we fall. Ready? Now we've told the Sigma 99.99 is what we think it is. It's still within the cursors, but it is as far to the right as it could possibly be. Again, if we were looking at this and I were recording it in a spreadsheet, I would probably call this a +2. That starts to give you questions, right? That's just a little bit too far off dead center. It's still probably authentic, but I'm a little bit less confident. Let's try flipping it over and see where we are. Well, that's a +1. It's still off dead center. So at this point, having tried both sides of it, every other test that I've used on it, I'm 100% confident that this is at least 99.9% pure. And you can make the argument that maybe it's even a little bit more pure than that. It's certainly no less pure than 99.9% pure. And again, I'm fine with that. That's what I expected it to be. Expectations can be a little bit of something to worry about also. If you get to be too confident that something is authentic without testing it, that's when you get into trouble. Let's go ahead and try the fake just to see what it looks like on 99.9. Again, we've got there is no cursor between the brackets at all. There's a little arrow that just kind of says get lost. It's so far off the edge that it's not even close. So there we go. We have authenticated a pure silver round, and we have definitely ruled out this piece as being a good piece of silver. But we already knew that, right? We already knew that by using not a really expensive $1,000 piece of equipment, but a $20 scale from Amazon. And again, if it had been a coin, we're using our loop, we're using the digital calipers, we're even using the magnets. All of these pieces combined are very inexpensive pieces of equipment that you should learn first before you really try the Sigma. But now you've seen how I would have approached something, and we're able to compare and contrast two pieces that do look quite similar, and they may have fooled you if you were in a busy, crowded place and you were just exchanging things quickly without really stopping to think about it. Using your eyesight, using heft, using a loop, take a loop with you. I've got one in my car at all times just in case I happen upon something interesting when I'm out in the field. Using calipers or a digital or a regular old school kind of a yardstick or a ruler, as long as it's got those millimeter increments, because that's the way most coins are measured. Getting a red book, and for a long time I kept a red book in my car also. I've gotten to be a little bit more comfortable with the pieces that I'm looking at, so I don't use it all the time. But if you're one of those folks that buys a red book every year, put the 2 or 3 years ago red book in your glove box if you've got room for it. Squeeze it in there with all those Taco Bell napkins. I think you know what I'm talking about. Ping test. Maybe you use them more often than I do, and maybe you're more comfortable with them than I am. But like I said before, I like the way that ping sounded on the fake piece, and I didn't really like the way it sounded on the real piece. So that's my concern when using a ping. Also, if you're in an environment where you really can't hear those results, you might convince yourself that you've got something that's authentic when it's not. All of these pieces come together to kind of determine what is real and what is fake. An interesting, ability to check these two pieces because they did look so similar, at least visually, right? But they are definitely not the same thing when it actually comes to measuring them. And I'm not saying don't buy a Sigma. I'm just saying that maybe use these other pieces of equipment first and really determine whether or not you've got this down to where you want it to be before you go asking the Sigma with a degree of confidence if what you have is real or what it is, if it's fake. There we go. Thanks for being with me on this journey as I kind of went without a net on this one. Maybe getting a little bit better at this, right? I hope I didn't sound like too much of a professor. This is a fun experiment. It's a fun thing to try these pieces of equipment out. It's fun to get good at using them. You start to build up that confidence. You feel a lot more comfortable with making these decisions in the wild. It's an important thing to do. If you have questions about any of the pieces of equipment that I use today, leave a message down below and I'll try to answer it. If you have experience using the ping and you're comfortable with it, let me know that. I'd like to hear it. I see videos on YouTube and other places where people talk about the power of a ping test. I've just never really gotten it. It just doesn't work for me the way that maybe it should, and maybe I'm doing something wrong. I wouldn't put it past me. If you've got suggestions for other videos that you'd like to see me make, or even video series, as always, leave that comment down below. I'll take a look and I'll see if I've got the examples and the information, the knowledge base to kind of make a video or two for you. And as always, and I mean this sincerely, thank you for allowing me to be a part of your journey as you go deeper into the world of coins and physical precious metals.